and always will, is about moving humanity forward. And remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Hey, folks, the man with the pinky ring and the New York thing, forget about it. Bad Brad Berkwitt. And you're watching another episode of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. Now, make sure you follow me on Twitter at BadBradRSR. Again, that's at BadBradRSR. And check out my great writing team on ringsidereport.com. Lots of diversity there, folks. Well, today you're probably wondering, hey, why are you wearing sunglasses? We know you got the pinky ring, but sunglasses? What's the deal with that? Well, folks, don't say it too loud. I'm disguising myself with the sunglasses because I'm incognito from an undisclosed location. I'm going to tell you why. When I announced Monday, my guest that's coming on today, I was attacked by various bots and trolls from the Church of Scientology. And that's what they do best. They bully people because that's what they like to be about. Okay. And if anybody watches my show, you know that's not what I'm about. Now, these particular two Twitter pages have blue checks. And when I click them, guess what? Twitter Blue, they bought them for $11. See, I don't buy a check because it means nothing anymore. People that I deal with that have the blue checks, they were verified way before Elon came on this platform and destroyed it. So when you have a paid for blue check, you probably shouldn't attack somebody. Now, one other thing about attacking me, you see my shadow box back there? Everyone that watches my show knows that I did 20 years and 28 days in the Navy during War and Peace from 1986 to 2006, okay? And unlike your God who left his body, L. Ron Hubbard, that you guys worship, the former cult leader who was in the Navy, okay, and was relieved of duty from 2 commands of ships that he held. Look it up. That wasn't for a good thing. And I'm going to talk about that on my show today, guys. So for all of those people that are going to attack me on this video and leave comments and all kinds of stuff, remember something about me. I can't be bullied. I can't be intimidated, and I will not be intimidated. Now, with that said, I am who I say I am. My name and my information on my page, I'm not with a fake name or hiding and don't put a name or have half a picture or go by a fake handle. That's not me, folks. So next time you decide to attack somebody, you need to attack that movie Battlefield Earth that came out in 2000, because that was something you should be attacking. It was the worst piece of shit ever made in the history of movies. And I'm a cinephile. And trust me, it was worse than the Ed Wood movie. And if you don't know the reference, look it up, because I'll take Plan 9 from outer space over Battlefield Earth any day of the week. And I'm a fan of John Travolta's. But hey, that movie was forget about it in the worst kind of way. All right. So now that that is out, let me introduce my special guest today. He is a former senior executive of the Church of Scientology International, CSI and Sea Org member, as well as the author of the recently published book, A Billion Years, My Escape from the Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology. And here is the book that I just got, okay? So I will be doing a future review on the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show. I greatly look forward to reading this book. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, and you haters out there who couldn't stand that I'm going to do this show and you couldn't intimidate me, please welcome the one and only Mike Rinder. Forget about it. Well, Mike, good afternoon to you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's great to be here with you.
I'm looking forward to this one. We're going to get into some things that have transpired this week that are very interesting for me, because it's first time I've ever faced those things. But hey, I welcome them with open arms, because as I know with you and Leah, you don't deal with bullies. I don't play around with bullies. I don't like that.
Right.
So what I want to say is this: we're going to do a 360 conversation of you today, talk about a bunch of things, and I always preface each show with this: if I have something wrong in my notes, please say, hey, Brad, it's actually this, because I want my interviews to be as factually correct. And I know that there's going to be people from the Church of Scientology that are going to say nothing is factually correct, but that's okay. We're prepared for that on my side. So
right.
All right. So what I want to do is I want to read something for the viewers. We're not shooting live, we're recording it, so I'll be releasing it a little bit later. But I want to read this for you, Mike, and I want to read this for the viewers as well. And then we'll talk about it on the other side. In my 27 years in the interview business, this was the first time I've ever done a show or had an interview in print that I legitimately got a full-on attack from any group of people before the guests came on. Never had it even after the guests came on, but this time I did, but that's fine. That thought they could intimidate me by bullying, which is something that I absolutely detest, and so we're here today. Now, I don't claim to be a SME, which in the Navy, I was in the Navy for 20 years and 28 days. A SME for the viewers is a subject matter expert. I don't claim to be a subject matter expert on Scientology. I have some opinions. But I will say this before we get into our 360 conversation today. I used to watch yours and Leah's show. Debbie and I did. And the number one issue that I have with Scientology, and it actually ties in with Jehovah's Witnesses too, is that when you leave the religion, or whatever you categorize it, or you get thrown out, and I think they call it, is it apostate? How you say the word?
Apostasy.
Okay. However, if it's that or whatever they do, and I think Jehovah's Witnesses, they disfellowship, they could do that too. I personally, as a human being, have a problem with any religion. I wouldn't care if it was Catholicism, Judaism, Muslim, whatever, that they feel they can tell the people that are still in the religion to turn their back on their kids, their wives, their best friends, their whoever. I think that's the personification of evil. So that is my number one gripe. And I know that is factual from watching your show and watching guests on your show and meeting people, that this is what happens, and also happens, and I know for a fact, with Jehovah's Witnesses. That is a common thing between the two things. So that is why I call it a cult. Now, I'm going to probably get attacked for that, and they may tell me it doesn't happen. We know differently. So that I wanted to lay out that groundwork. As well, it looks like from reading the opening for your book, which we're going to talk about later, it looks like you were first brought into the fold of Scientology at the age of 5. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
So that would have been about 1960?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, by your parents. Now, I want to make one more point, and I'll ask you a question over this. For me, this is very important to our 360 conversation today because, Mike, straight up, I'm not here to judge you about what transpired, and I'm not here to say that I know what transpired when you were in it, because that's where I'm going to get attacked. They're going to say, Mike said this and Mike said that. I'm not getting into that with them. But what I want to say is this, again, as a human being that cares about humanity. Viewers, he was 5 years old. So you get put into something from 5 years old, and it looks like you were in there until the age, I think, to 52. Is that what it was?
Yes,
so
that's
for everybody,
right.
that's 47 years of being in something. So before you attack somebody, let's put that in context, okay? It saddens me because knowing some of your story, and I'm going to read your book, a 5-year-old child was put into something that they found out years later was not what they thought it was. And that could be in anything, you know, it's anything that's a cult. It could be Manson's cult. It could be anything. It could be with Jim Jones. It could be anything. So my heart goes out to you on that, Mike. And I know they're going to attack and say, well, this, that, and the other. But I'm telling you where I'm coming from today as we talk. With that said, I want to ask you, what do you remember from this young age of how other children your age were treated at that time?
You mean other children in Scientology?
Yes.
You know, Brad, there wasn't really anything that I would categorize as overt abuse, you know, physical or things that, you know, requiring sorts of punishment or anything like that. But I will say that inculcating kids with these ideas of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and that everything in your life is answered by the writings and words of L. Ron Hubbard is an inordinately dangerous thing to do. If you hammer into any child that there is just one solution and one place to turn for every answer in life, you are creating a zombie child. And while I was, I was certainly not a zombie like the Walking Dead zombie.
Right.
I was certainly someone who, as life went on, and this is the case with all the Scientology raised children I know, as life went on, you become more and more convinced that the answers contained in Scientology are the only valid answers to any problem that may exist in your life or even in other people's lives. And that's sort of the shtick of Scientology. It is, but understand, Brad, now I have left Scientology. I have had contact with a lot of people who have been in other high control groups, if that's what you want to call them, or cults, Jehovah's Witnesses, Nexium. I mean, I'm very good friends with the people who created and are the stars of the Vow because of our shared experiences. And talking to these people and, former Mormons, former Jehovah's Witnesses, some people from Jim Jones, the similarities in the way that people are sort of trained to believe and to see the world through a certain lens, the lens that is provided to them by that organization or that cult leader, it's remarkable. It is a combination of a form of hypnotism, a combination of peer pressure. There is an inordinate amount of peer pressure in these sort of cult groups where you are surrounded by people who are all claiming the same things. Like they're all telling you, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and this worked for me. And so you feel obligated to go along with your family members or your parents or the people that you're working with or the people that you're associating with. Peer pressure, there's a lot of psychological experiments about the import of peer pressure. There is that famous one where there's a whole bunch of people and they're asked to tell you which line is the longer of the two lines, and every person says the short one is the longer one, and then the guy that's the subject of the experiment is sort of looking around going, what am I missing? I guess I'll pick that one too because everybody else did. And that is an extremely strong motivation inside cults. And then there is a third thing. They all promise some form of immortality, afterlife, salvation from the coming Armageddon or the terrible fate that is going to befall this planet if we don't get our message out to everybody. Truthfully, every religion has that to some extent, but cults have it big time. Scientology convinces you that if you are not in Scientology, there is no hope for you to have anything but a dark, black, painful existence for the rest of your eternity. And so that's a big motivating factor and control mechanism that is used. And as you mentioned previously, in Scientology and these other groups, disconnection, disfellowshipping, there's various names for it, but in Scientology, it's called disconnection. Disconnection is an extraordinarily powerful tool to keep the sheeple in line. And my book is really about the subject of disconnection. My book is written for my children, the children that I brought into Scientology and are still there, who have disconnected from me. So I know that that's a long rambling
No,
response
that's
to a
no,
relatively short question.
no. I'm glad you went there. And I want to add one other thing too. Mike and I kind of laughed when we started doing this. Mike knows what I'm laughing about, the Scientology, the bots and the trolls and everybody that attacked me, and they also attacked Mike as well when I dropped the press release. One thing interesting about them bullying and their antics, attacking you and Lee and posting, all this stuff and telling me that my show's not about moving. They know everything. They know nothing. But the truth
Right.
of the matter is this. Here's the thing. Not one of them asked for parody. Not one of them said, hey, we want to come on your show because we want to tell our side. Nobody said that. Nobody said, hey, and you're not welcome now because you went about it the wrong way. Okay, like I said, I'm not here to say I'm a subject matter expert in Scientology. That was your wheelhouse. I'm not here to say what happened when you were in there or what didn't, but I'm not going off of what people say that don't ask for parody and think that they're going to insult me or tell me about my show that they don't watch, that they never heard of me before you came on. So, they're showing their hand on what they are. And one other thing that I want to say is in 2013, I acted in a dinner theater with somebody in a show in Clearwater. And you'll know this much better than I do, Mike. One that they try to do with this dinner theater, they served alcohol, is they try to, almost extort the person at the time, I'm not going to say their name, that owned the place because they didn't like what they were doing. They didn't like the entertainment, whatever it was. I don't know the whole story, but I remember being down there and seeing them come in. I also remember very young people I want to say maybe black pants, white shirt. And if I remember correctly, because actually the director of the show was an ex-Scientologist that he was kicked out, who was from South Africa. He was telling me, and you could tell me if this is true or false, that they had pagers. This is in 2013 when people had cell phones. And I want to say they were one-way pagers. Does that sound correct?
Oh yeah, that was a very common thing. Scientology doesn't move with the times very well.
Okay.
They tend to be sort of stuck in the past, and pages were a big thing back in, the 80s, early 80s, but they just carried on because they didn't want to give people cell phones. Okay, the reason for not giving them cell phones,
Internet.
well, today you can get on the internet, but even back then, you could call the police. You could call anybody you wanted. You could call the local newspaper. So I just want to go back to something that you raised there, Brad, which is this idea about coming on the show and presenting their side. When we were doing the Aftermath show, we sent an invitation to Scientology every single episode.
I remember.
And said, we welcome anybody to come on. Leah and I started tweeting. It's funny, I saw this tweet a while ago where we listed out a list of 30 people saying, and added all of them, everyone we could find, and said, we invite you to come on our show. Please, anybody from Scientology, even if you're not on this list, if you're a Scientologist and you want to present your side of the story, come on down. We would love to talk to you. We would love to have an interaction with you. Mm-hmm. But that never happens.
No.
And the same thing happened on the Aftermath. They would find out who it was that was going to be in the episode, and we would get these huge, long threat letters about that person before the episode aired. They did not know what the person said or was going to say, but they just went off with, oh, this guy is a liar, he's a bigot, he's a hater, he's just doing it for money, he's this, he's that, he's blah, 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 blah. And that is, unfortunately, the modus operandi of Scientology, and it is based on writings of L. Ron Hubbard. Brad, it's so ironic. Your career in the Navy, your service to the country. L. Ron Hubbard was in the Navy too.
Oh, I got notes. I got notes to talk about it.
He had a rather checkered career in the Navy, notes. I should say.
I got notes.
But he claimed that he was in naval intelligence and that he was in naval intelligence. Yeah, well, he claims he was in naval intelligence, and I mean, it's a long story to get into, but you know, the contradictions in his records. The Scientology found this guy eventually who said, "Oh, that's because his files were sheep dipped, and fake files were made up of his service record to cover up the fact that he was in naval intelligence." Yeah. It's complete bullshit.
Yeah,
that did not happen. But because he was in naval intelligence, quote unquote, and therefore an expert on intelligence, Hubbard developed and wrote a whole bunch of things of what Scientology is supposed to do in order to destroy its enemies. And this includes case officers, agents, running programs to frame people for things, setting them up, smearing them. I mean, literally in detail, these things are laid out of what this is what Scientologists are supposed to do to deal with anybody they think is an enemy. And an enemy is anybody that isn't doing what they want them to do.
right.
Whether you're right or wrong, whether you're telling the truth or not, if you're not doing what they want you to do, or you're not saying what they want you to say, you become an enemy. So therefore, you must be destroyed. You must be smeared. You must be attacked. They must come after you and try and intimidate you. And this is one of the things that sets Scientology apart from all other organizations in the field of religion or thought or philosophy or bullshit, whatever field you can put. Jehovah's Witnesses, the Roman Catholic Church, everybody. I mean, Scientology has tax exemption from the IRS as a 501c3 religious organization. So let's say there is no other organization that has religious exempt status from the IRS that has a department of the organization with staff assigned full-time to conduct intelligence operations and campaigns against its enemies.
Jesus. Sounds like McCarthyism.
Yeah.
Sounds like McCarthyism. It really does.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And you know, your tax dollars are subsidizing that.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, and I saw it in doing research, and I think you and Leah both complained about it. I saw they got PPP money.
Yes, they did. And yet they claim that everybody that works in a Scientology organization is a volunteer, not an employee, so that they can avoid having to comply with labor laws, pay taxes, or any of the other. They're just all volunteers.
Right.
And yet they got PPP loans to pay the volunteers.
Of course. Of course. It's oh boy. Okay. After high school, you signed a billion-year contract and was admitted into Scientology's elite inner circle, the C organization. Is that correct?
Yep, that's exactly right.
You were brought to founder L. Ron Hubbard's yacht and promised trading in Hubbard's most advanced techniques. Instead, and I think I got this in your book, or I got it from your website, you were put to work swabbing the decks.
Yep,
correct?
That's right.
There you go.
I was.
I was like, oh, here's a Navy term, swabbing the decks. So I have to ask you, it's probably in your book, but if you would, Mike, as you're swabbing the decks, what is going through your mind? Because you went there for one thing and it gave you a swab for another.
Well, that's a great question, Brad. And yes, it is in my book, and it is the most difficult thing that I had to do in writing this book, was to try and dredge up my feelings and emotions and what was going through my head at this point. Like what was going on? Like, this is crazy. I mean, there's a lot more crazy stuff than just being put to swab the decks, believe me. But that was the sort of first moment that I realized that joining the C organization and signing that billion-year contract, and that billion-year contract is a symbolic commitment to serving, to achieve the aims of Scientology for all of eternity. that when you sign that contract or when you join the Sea Organization, you are no longer in control of your life in any respect. You are owned. You are owned like a slave is owned. I mean, I was literally told, because I was supposed to be going there, training, and then going back to Australia, which is where I had come from. And I said, well, that, you know, they said, no, you've been traded. You were a coin that was used to repay something. And I'm like, what? A coin? I didn't even know what this means. Yeah. The Australian church paid a debt that they owed by giving you to us. I'm like, really? Is there anything I can do about this? No, you're a Sea Org member. You do whatever you're told. You go wherever you're ordered to go. So the beauty of swabbing the decks, honestly, Brad, is and pinholing and caulking. I mean, there were teak decks with actual caulk. I mean, this was an old ship. Was that I was sort of outside in a pleasant environment and didn't really have any responsibilities to worry about other than making sure the decks were clean. And so it was not like I was put into, you know, a horrible physically taxing or mentally taxing environment. So it was kind of like, okay, well, I can put up with this. This ain't so bad. And, you know, things go on from there. And so then you get the next thing. Well, I can put up with this. That's not so bad. Oh, everybody else seems to be doing fine with this, so I can put up with this too. And pretty soon you're a fully immersed boiled frog.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like you rose through the ranks, and by the 80s, you were Scientology's international spokesperson, the head of its powerful Office of Special Affairs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The Office of Special Affairs is that intelligence branch that I was talking about.
Okay. It looked like you helped negotiate Scientology's pivotal tax exemption from the IRS and engage with the organization's prominent celebrity members, which included some names were Tom Cruise, Lisa Marie Presley, and John Travolta. What I want to ask you off of that talking point is to ascend to that position, did L. Ron Hubbard have his eyes directly on you, or were there other people that moved you up those ranks?
A bit of both.
Okay.
L. Ron Hubbard certainly had an influence in my rise in Scientology, and but there were also other people who were his the people that worked directly with him, who they sort of took it upon themselves to bring me up through the ranks, and so it was sort of a combination.
Okay. And the other thing, and my type of interview, and I'm not a sensationalist like they are. I don't do that. I don't play that I got you type of thing. If I ask you a tough question, I ask you a tough question, but it's not coming from a place of I'm trying to get you. But and that's not even the type of question I'm getting ready to ask you. But low-lying fruit would be to go after John Travolta, Tom Cruise, and God rest his soul, Lisa Marie. I don't want to go in that direction. I want to go in a different direction with the question. I'm curious, with the careers that John Travolta and Tom Cruise have had, you know, major movie stars, does Scientology play into any of the type of roles? Because, you know, they promote family-friendly type of thing. And this is no insult to Tom or to John, but some of their roles have not been family-friendly. So does Scientology have any say-so in that?
Okay, there is a funny story in the book, Brad, that I've just got to recount to you because you'll get it. John, I worked quite a lot with John because I was dealt with the media and stuff, and he was always having media problems and, you know, people coming after him and this and that. And I got to know him pretty well. And he came to me and he said, I want to ask your advice on something. I said, yeah, sure. He said, I want to give you a script and have you look at it and read it and tell me what you think. And it was the script for Pulp Fiction.
Oh boy.
And I read it and I went, John, I just don't see you doing this role of, a heroin and addicted assassin. That's not really, that's not really what Scientology is looking to portray. But your life is your life. You're an actor and actors do all sorts of roles, but I don't think you should do that one. Of course, that was really good advice that he ignored.
Well, yeah, revived his career.
Exactly. I don't think that like it's such a hard question to answer because on one hand, Scientology wants them to succeed because success is more important than what they represent in the roles that they portray. So if it's an unpleasant role, but highly successful, that is seen as being very good for Scientology.
Okay.
It would be super good for Scientology if it was very successful and it also sort of espoused the virtues that Scientology claims to espouse. But success is far more important than the actual role itself.
Okay. Out of curiosity, does Scientology impose on people based on, I don't even know if it's based on income, a certain percentage of a certain percentage of their salary? And I'm not talking about John and Musa, but anybody to give money? No, it's not. They don't do that.
Not a percentage. It is not a tithing system. The Mormons have tithing. Scientology have price lists and high pressure sales techniques.
Okay.
And commissions for bringing people in and commissions for getting them to pay. And Scientology is set up like a business that has a very, very high priority placed on its sales and marketing department. And, that's one of the things that's sort of surprising about how the IRS manages to grant Scientology tax-exempt status, because there is actually a Supreme Court case that was ruled on just a few years before the exemption that said, if you give money to Scientology, you are paying for something. It is a quid pro quo, and therefore it is not deductible. And that was overturned by the IRS ruling.
Okay. I want to read something we'll talk about on the other side. During these years as well, it was said you couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something was amiss. Hubbard's promises remained unfulfilled at his death, and his successor, David, how do you say how do you say his name? Miscavige, was ruthless and a vindictive man who did not hesitate to confine many top Scientologists, you among them, to a makeshift prison known as the Hole. Is that correct so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mike, full stop right there. I'm a very visual person. And as I read this, I could see you in this hole or prison or whatever it was. How in the hell has the FBI, the DOJ, or any authority not found this, or have they, or if they have, how is this cult doing stuff like this, which I know they're going to come on this video and deny all of it? How can it still exist with stuff like this? You would think this was 1700s, not not this century. How does this still exist?
Well, Brad, that's the question that I have too. I don't have a good answer for that. Well, I sort of do have an answer. I'm being a bit of a snarky here. The FBI and the DOJ and the IRS are fearful of repercussions to some extent. They also look at, and there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not just that Scientology is vindictive and attacks and files lawsuits and threatens and sends private investigators, et cetera, et cetera. That has some impact on their decision making. It certainly doesn't appear to have an impact on the decision-making of the FBI. They conducted an investigation in 2009 and 2010 into that exact thing, the whole human trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. The Department of Justice decided not to pursue a case. Now, why did the Department of Justice decide not to pursue a case? That's a question that they would ultimately have to answer, but I do know a few things. One, and I write about it in the book, one of the most significant events in the history of the government and religion, if you want to call it religion, is Waco. Yeah. And Waco happened in 1993, in April of 1993. And that had a huge impact on the IRS. They caved in and granted tax-exempt status to Scientology in October of 1993. It had a chilling effect throughout the US government. Religious organizations, whoa, let's steer clear of this, particularly if we're going to try and prosecute them for anything. The second reason is that Scientology does a very good job of going around and hiring people of influence, lobbyists, former people from the DOJ, and they went and hired one of the head of the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California and got her lobbying, saying, you know, whatever they say. This is going to be the last thing you do in your career. This is going to, like, it'll never end. Scientology will fight you all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and then back again. And so that's one other thing. Another thing is every government agency, law enforcement agency, has to make decisions about where do they devote their resources and time. And that typically comes down in favor of things that they know everybody will get on board with. Going after drug smugglers, going after, whatever, but going after something that they're going to shout religion, bigotry, you're persecuting us is not high on the list. And then finally, the reason some of those things are the way they are is because the powerful lobbyists for the mainstream religions believe that things like Scientology and the Jehovah's Witnesses and these other sort of what they consider to be fringe groups are the outer bulwarks of their kingdoms. That if they manage to take down Scientology, well, maybe that will set a bad precedent for us in some way. So there is a lot of political weight behind not pursuing religious organizations, even if they're dubious religious organizations or they're religious organizations in name only.
Yeah.
Though the mainstream religions want to keep that at bay. They're happy that the fight is out there on the fringes with the people that don't really matter and not with them.
And I agree with you. And a talking point to come back a point to what you just said off of Scientology, I think that also ties in with we see more, especially during the Trump era, but it's been going on for years, and Democrats and Republicans are both guilty of this. They don't go after these churches that use their pulpits to say, vote for Trump, vote for Biden, whatever they do, because as you know, well, because it's your will, it's supposed to be a separation of church and state. And they don't want to take that on. And even though they say, oh, we're going to do it, they never do it. I wish that they would, because I'm tired of Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, and all of them. I don't care if they're pushing Democratic or they're pushing Republican. Doesn't matter. It's not supposed to be like that. You don't get tax exempt when you're pushing politics from the pulpit. And a lot of people, prosperity preachers, and a lot of them are doing that, and they're doing that and they don't care, and they're emboldened because nobody is going after them. So it kind of ties in along the same lines of what you just said.
Yep, that's exactly right, Brad.
Okay. One other name, and I'm not calling him out to pick on him, but I would like clarification. Was Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Scientologists, or was that just, what was the deal there?
Well, they were. They were sort of closet Scientologists. They were
Okay.
more wanting to participate in Scientology by using L. Ron Hubbard's study technology. This is just another part of Scientology where Hubbard said he had developed the techniques and technology for how anybody could learn. And so they opened a school that was staffed entirely by people who were trained in this Hubbard Scientology technology, most of which were devout Scientologists. But that didn't last that long, and neither of them seemed to really, they didn't ever really sort of get themselves fully in and on board. They were kind of on the fringes, agreeing with certain bits, not really wanting to be known to be Scientologists. They were definitely not of the Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley bent of I'm out there proselytizing for Scientology, telling everybody how great it is.
Okay. And I would be remiss, and you actually read my mind. I was going to mention Kirstie Alley, but now you brought up, is Scientology, are they anti-vax?
It's funny. It's both. While many Scientologists, just so you know, Brad, I've written about this quite a lot on my blog, but a lot of Scientologists tend to be conservative in their thinking and their views.
Okay.
And that is for a number of reasons. Hubbard was pretty anti-government. He just didn't like government at all. He thought the FBI were cockroaches and vermin and blah, 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 and et cetera, et cetera. He also, the big boogeyman of Scientology is psychiatry. And because liberals tend to favor healthcare and healthcare for all, that often includes mental health care, Scientologists are very, very, very opposed to that. And similarly, Scientologists and Hubbard was, his view was, we help the able become more able. You don't reward downstats. A downstat in Scientology terminology is someone who is not doing well in life, because by rewarding them, you encourage them to continue to not do well in life.
Okay.
So charity and welfare is a sort of, we don't do that. That's not for us. So and he's also very anti-tax. And so with all of those factors combined, the vast majority of Scientologists tend to lean conservatives, Republican.
Yeah.
And because they lean that way, they then tend to watch the conservative right-leaning media, and then they start, it's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy. You start with this kind of bent, and then you just keep getting bent further and further this way. Happens on the left too. Mm-hmm. You start with a bent, and you get the information that you get and that you ingest is all oriented toward your proclivities already, or your tendencies already. So many Scientologists have been sort of loud anti-vaxxers. But on the other hand, internally within the organization and the C organization, because David Miscavige is paranoid about catching a disease or, dying, everybody had to have vaccinations.
Oh, sounds like the Trumps.
It was like, on one hand, it's the world is anti-vax, and on the other hand, we're going to make everybody get it.
But that's hypocrisy, because that's like Trump getting vaccinated before he left the White House, but not telling the people about it. It had to come out in the media pretty much that he got vaxxed. So some of his cult decided, wait a second, he got it. Now, there's a lot of them that hate him because he got it, but they got it. Off of that talking point, something that I found out in my research, and I actually made an assumption and I was wrong. Because like I said earlier in the show, Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientologists have that tie-in about if you leave and your wife is still in it, she's supposed to cut you off. I made the assumption, and I was wrong, that Scientology, because Jehovah's Witnesses are literally told not to vote. Scientologists can vote, correct? Exactly,
Yes.
like you just said. Like you just said, which to me is crazy that Jehovah's Witnesses tell them not to do that, because that is like one of your biggest things. You're letting things happen and not using your vote, and you're a huge block of people, especially in a smaller town where you could affect your livelihood. As you know, I don't have to preach. I'm not preaching to you, but I was shocked to learn that Scientologists did vote. But with Kirstie Alley, was Hubbard and is David, are they misogynists? Would you consider them misogynists?
No.
No?
No, I wouldn't. No. Hubbard, that's one thing I would never accuse Hubbard of being. I would accuse Miscavige of being homophobic, very much so.
Okay.
And Hubbard was homophobic.
And his son was gay, right? Wasn't his son gay?
Yeah, one of them.
Right.
The elder one, Quentin.
Yeah.
But not like, there's been a lot of women who have risen to the highest levels of Scientology and the highest levels of the Sea Organization. Doesn't happen to be one now, that's Miscavige, but there's never been a stigma associated with being, at least in the Sea Organization, and therefore in the hierarchy of Scientology, of being a woman. Although there are some very, very antiquated, what you would call misogynistic ideas that are still in the writings of Hubbard.
Okay.
Like, because understand, Brad, one of the things about Scientology that makes it sort of weird and in some ways difficult to understand is the writings of L. Ron Hubbard are considered to be, quote, scripture. They cannot be changed by anybody. And they last in perpetuity, therefore. So what Hubbard wrote in 1950 about the role of women it didn't evolve. It has not evolved at all. What he wrote about homosexuality, not evolved at all. A lot of things that he has written, and Scientologists today still take that as, this is their thing. This is what they believe. This is, and because Hubbard said it, it's true.
And where I was going at with particularly Allie is the reason why I asked were they misogynists, because this is my opinion, and I think I'm right on this. Donald Trump is probably one of the biggest misogynistic pigs that the world has ever seen. And she doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. She worshiped Trump. So I was wondering, was it because she's used to misogynistic men that would, that talk like this and act like this towards women? And you just said that Hubbard, and that's one thing you can't put on him. But she was such a devout Trump supporter. I'm like, are women getting treated like that? So they think that's normal behavior? Because I never understand how women could be behind this guy being such a, I don't care about the conservative side. That's fine. I don't care what your politics are. But the misogynistic side of this man, the way he talks about women and treats women, that's where I was going with that with Allie. But what I wanted to
I don't know about Kirstie, Brad. Kirstie was always a sort of one of those people who likes to do and say things that shock those around her and what she perceives as her audience. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Kirstie. I've been to her house. I've spent time with her. She's very, 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 she was very, very, very funny. And she was funny because she would say the most outrageous stuff, like outrageous, not political, just outrageous stuff. Right. And she seemed toward the end of her life to decide that her only way of getting attention anymore was to say outrageous political stuff.
Yeah.
And that to me is more what I saw motivating her than any true philosophical or ideological ideas that she may have had.
That's a play out of the Trump book, because that's what the Trumps do. They say the most, they put it out there in the ether because it picks up hits and likes and video clips and everything else, and it keeps them even more relevant. I mean, his son does it every day. I want to get into L. Ron Hubbard, and I want to read something to you, and then we'll talk about it. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. Hubbard was an officer in the Navy during World War II, where he briefly commanded 2 ships. But from my research, he was removed from command both times. Is that what you understand? Correct. Too? Okay.
Yes.
Now, I was in the Navy, as I said, for 20 years and 28 days. And I know that if a commanding officer gets removed, I don't know how he got 2 ships after the first one. I've seen commanding officers, if a ship runs aground, they get removed. I've seen them even not be on the ship and get removed if something happens, because they're ultimately responsible for the ship. So this man got removed twice. And I know, like I said, I know it's a big deal. And from my research, his superiors said, and this is what I found, that he was, quote, unsuitable for independent duties and lacking in the essential qualities of judgment, leadership, and cooperation. Do you know that story too to be true?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
So my question is, kind of being snarky here, is nobody looked at this and said, we don't want this guy, we shouldn't be following this guy, because these are things that the Navy's saying about him. But then you did say he was anti-government and all that, so he probably could spin that and say they had it out. I could visualize this. They had it out for me. They never liked me. Whatever. Was it one of those type of things?
There's two things here. One, Brad, all of that information didn't come out until, I don't know, maybe the 70s. I think that when Russell Miller's book, he did an unauthorized biography of Hubbard, went back and dug up all the records and this and that it wasn't until then that this even surfaced in the world of Scientology. But for, 25 years prior to that, Hubbard had set the stage, telling everybody that A, I was a naval intelligence officer, B, I served my country, but I hated war, but my men loved me, but it was an experience that taught me so many things, and now I'm applying all those experiences. Like all of this sort of, spinny, I'm going to spin this to my best advantage. The government is a bunch of assholes who are out to destroy Scientology because we can solve the problems of mankind, and they don't want those solved. And plus, they do horrible experiments on people, mind control experiments, and we have the only way that we've discovered and uncovered these mind control experiments, and the government is out to get me, and blah, blah, blah. So in the world of Scientology, that never really was an issue until that book, and then a number of court cases where a bunch of these documents came out in court cases. And at that point, there was a bit of a panic in Scientology of, what are we going to do to make sure that Ron's image isn't destroyed? And as I said, found this guy called L. Fletcher Prouty. And L. Fletcher Prouty is...
Another L?
Yeah. He was in the Oliver Stone JFK movie. Okay. He's like a conspiracy theory guy who has some credentials as a, I can't even remember what he was, a lieutenant commander in naval intelligence or something. I mean, He has credentials, but he also was one of these guys that if you paid him enough money, he'd basically say anything you wanted. And like a lot of experts, and there are experts in every field that make a living out of being experts, and they only make a living and get paid if they say what the people who are paying them want them to say.
Right.
And Prouty came up with this story about how Hubbard's war records were all phony because they had been created actually by naval intelligence to mislead and cover up his real activities and operations. And that was the perfect thing for Scientology, and that was used in lawsuits and with the media and various other people to say, well, you know, these records of Hubbard's naval career, you can't rely on those. You can't read those things. They're planted there to make him look bad because he was such a important part of the intelligence apparatus, blah, 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 blah. It's all bullshit. And, you know, it's very funny that position, or taking that position, resulted in perhaps the biggest catastrophe for Scientology PR-wise ever, which was when Lawrence Wright was writing his article for the New Yorker. The person who had replaced me, Tommy Davis, challenged Larry Wright and said, well, you know, if all of this stuff about Hubbard is untrue, and about his naval career and what happened and his research into Dianetics and blah, 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 then the whole of Scientology just falls apart. And Larry went, well, that's an interesting proposition. And he started researching it. And that research led to him writing the book, Going Clear, which led to him reaching out to Alex Gibney, his friend, and making the HBO movie, which that movie was the single turning point in the history of Scientology's PR in the world. It changed the perception of Scientology generally. It changed the perception of the media with respect to Scientology. And, you know, everything that followed thereafter, including the aftermath, is sort of riding on the heels of that, but Going Clear. So, you know, it's funny. It's sort of ironic how that particular subject, you know, the domino effect, led to the very bad consequences of trying to cover up bullshit like that.
Okay. I want to read something to you and ask you a question off of it. It looks like Scientology became increasingly controversial during the 60s and came under intense media, government, and legal pressure in a number of countries. During the late 1960s and early 70s, Hubbard spent much of his time at sea on his personal fleet of ships as Commodore of the Sea Organization, an elite quasi-paramilitary group of Scientologists. Is that statement correct?
Yep.
Okay. So my question off of that was, when I was thinking about this, was he staying on those ships out to sea because he could do dirt because he was past a certain, you know, like some boats can go off and have gambling.
International waters.
Yeah. Is that why he did that?
Yeah.
I figured that.
Yeah. To be Fabian is the word that he used, and to be outside of the reach of the governments who were seeking to serve him with papers, or, you know, find out about his taxes, or et cetera, et cetera.
Mike, I swear this sounds like Donald Trump. It sounds like maybe Trump's not a Scientologist, is he?
No.
Okay, so it looks like Hubbard returned to the United States in 1975, went into seclusion in California desert after an unsuccessful attempt to take over somewhere that I talked about earlier, Clearwater, Florida. Is that true? Did he try to take over Clearwater?
Well, Scientology tries to take over everywhere.
Okay.
We moved to Clearwater in 1975, and Clearwater was a small, sleepy town on the west coast of Florida, and certainly the idea was to create a town or a city that was like Salt Lake City was for the Mormons, a sort of a headquarters, a safe location and haven where Scientology was accepted and seen to be an important and vital part of the community. And that didn't happen.
Okay. And I was curious about that because when I was in there in 2013, the city part, I've seen the buildings. I mean, those buildings they got a lot of money poured into that town. And like I said,
Yep.
you see a lot of young men and women walking around, as I told you, with the pagers and all of that. Okay. In 78, he was convicted of fraud and tried in, how do you say the word, absentia, I think?
Yeah, in absentia.
Absentia by France. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was that about?
It was a case, I'm not really familiar with all the details, but
Okay.
a case that claimed that Scientology was selling fraudulent medical and mental healing, and the French government included Hubbard as one of the defendants in the case, but he was never served because he was on a ship.
Yeah.
And, or hiding out in the US somewhere. And so in France, you can just say, well, he didn't show up, so we're going to try him anyway. And that's what being found guilty in absentia means.
Okay. And then in the same year, 11 high-ranking members of Scientology were indicted on 28 charges for their role in the church's Snow White program, which they said was a systematic program of espionage against the United States government. One of the indicted was Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, who was in charge of the program. L. Ron Hubbard was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, this was what I said. The intelligence branch of Scientology had conducted the largest infiltration of the US government in its history. They had agents that were planted in government offices who were stealing documents and photocopying documents, and they were in the IRS, in the DOJ, in lawyers' offices, in the offices of senators and Congress people. And ultimately what happened is that two of them got caught by FBI agents in the IRS, and they were arrested and they were out on bail. And one of them was taken back. This happened in DC. One of them was taken back to Los Angeles. He wanted to turn himself in. He said, I have to show up for my, whatever the next step was that was going to happen. They said, we don't want you doing that. And ultimately, they kidnapped the guy. His name was Michael Meisner. They moved him from safe house to safe house, literally transporting him around with a tennis ball tied into his mouth and him handcuffs in the back of a car from safe house to safe house. He eventually decided he was going to cooperate and be a good boy, and they took their eyes off him for 30 minutes. He ran away and went straight to the FBI. They got a federal judge to issue a search warrant, and the premises of Scientology Guardian's office, the spy operation, were raided in Los Angeles and DC. And they took thousands and thousands of documents, and those documents were horrendously incriminating. They were about campaigns to stage fake hit and runs on the mayor of Clearwater and get him arrested, getting a journalist arrested, and she had been arrested for making bomb threats and threats against Henry Kissinger, because they got agents to go and get her fingerprints on a piece of paper and then typed a threat letter and sent it as if it was from her address. She was in trial. She was being tried for this and had absolutely no defense. I mean, she was just sort of standing there going, I have no idea. I don't know what this is. And there's she would have been convicted because they planted a lot of good evidence. And in that raid, the document showed, here is the plan of how we frame Paulette Cooper for a bomb threat. And of course, when that came out, the case got dropped, but there was a whole bunch more.
Yeah.
And all of these people were charged, and eventually they all just pled guilty and went to prison.
Okay. So back to something you said earlier off the top of my head, that Hubbard was against the government, and obviously I would assume that permeated through Scientology ranks, that the government is this and that and other. So when Scientologists saw January 6th and an insurrection, them trying to turn over a free and fair election because of Trump's bullshit, what would they tell them in Scientology? I mean, or what do you hear?
I didn't really hear anything about that. I don't know. I assume that the people who were, and like I said earlier, generally, I think that Scientologists lean conservative/Republican.
Right.
I assume that they probably bought a lot of the, this is Antifa, this is a staged event, this was something this is a false equivalency, this is like the Black Lives Matter protests, but nobody's up in arms about that. Why is anybody up in arms about this? I assume that. I don't really know it. I also don't believe that in general, Scientologists agree with violence being a solution to anything, physical violence. That is not something that I have, other than the physical violence and abuse that is meted out by David Miscavige to his underlings. I'm talking about, literally going and bashing down doors and that sort of stuff. That's not really where Scientology is at.
Okay. Recently, the Golden Globes Award MC Jared Carmichael took shots at Scientology by saying, backstage, I found these 3 Golden Globe Awards at Tom Cruise return. I know I'm just the host briefly or whatever, but I have a pitch, he said, referring to the star giving back his statues in 2021 in the protest of Hollywood Foreign Press Association's racial exclusion scandal. Maybe we take these 3 things and exchange them for the return of Shelley Masker, David's wife. Did you know he was going to say that?
No.
Okay.
No, that was shocking. Okay. That was wonderful.
Right.
It brought to the world's attention an issue which is an outrageous state of affairs that Leah in particular has been screaming about since 2015 or 2013. And that is the fact that David Miscavige managed to effectively, literally disappear his wife. And
as of August of 2007, right?
2005.
Oh, 2005. Okay.
Yeah. The significance of this is larger than it may at first seem, because his wife, Shelley, was not just his wife, she was his personal assistant. She was with him everywhere. She was his sidekick. She was his second in command. She was a very, very, very visible presence. And, she was even assigned to be in charge of hiring and firing the staff in Tom Cruise's household. And yet she didn't appear at the wedding of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes, the wedding of the century in Italy. And that was when Leah said, where's Shelley? Like, she had been at every event, like every premiere for a Tom Cruise movie, Dave and Shelley would go and hobnob with, Steven Spielberg and Robert Towne and whoever was around at the time, whatever movie it was. And she was a very, very prominent person in the world of Scientology. She pissed him off. And L. Ron Hubbard's wife...
Why did she piss him off? Why did she piss him off?
Because she started doubting that he was doing the right thing.
Of course.
And was not fulfilling the true intentions of L. Ron Hubbard, who had died in 1986. And Shelley was really raised by L. Ron Hubbard. Shelley was a child of 11 when she went to the ship with Hubbard. Her parents were not there. Hubbard and Mary Sue Hubbard basically raised her.
Well, let me ask you, hold on, my man. You said he died in 86, but isn't it he left his body and he didn't die? Isn't that this? I mean, no, I'm being funny, but that's for the research that he didn't die. He's doing studies, right? Or something like that. Isn't that what we're supposed to believe?
Yes. He discarded his body because it had become an impediment to his continued research.
Right. So whenever
he is off doing that continued research.
Yeah, so this extra weight I put on, I'm trying to get off. I just want to discard that and go into another. I want a 6-pack abs. So I mean, this okay. So it's insanity. So go ahead. Go ahead. So she was a child of 11.
But like L. Ron Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard considered Mary Sue Hubbard, his wife, who ultimately went to prison, that you just mentioned earlier, to have horribly betrayed him by getting caught. Even though she and the rest of those people fell on their sword and refused to incriminate him in any way, shape, or form, so the DOJ could not prosecute him, he remained an unprosecuted, unindicted co-conspirator because they all said, oh, Ron, he knew nothing about anything. I mean, of course, that was complete bullshit.
Bullshit, yep.
But he believed that she had basically failed and betrayed him, and he banished her from his life. She lived in a home in Los Feliz in California under virtual house arrest by Sea Org members who were there to watch over her and to spy on her for David Miscavige, who reported to L. Ron Hubbard. When Shelley became a potential threat to Dave's control of the Scientology empire, she too was disappeared to a property that one of the Scientology properties that is very remote and very highly secure, and has not been seen since she was at the funeral of her father with a minder in August of 2007. That's what the reference of 2007, because her father died. There was a memorial service. She showed up, but she had a minder with her to make sure she didn't escape.
And I'm assuming that all of her family is still in Scientology?
Well, her parents are both deceased. One of her older sisters is still in the Sea organization.
Wait, hold on. I gotta stop you. How can they be deceased and L. Ron Hubbard's still alive? I don't get that. I'm serious. How does he get to live on and they're deceased? I mean, even Shirley MacLaine can't explain this.
Well, that's a long discussion that we can have about what Scientologists think and believe. But in any event, they're gone. Her older sister is still in the Sea Org. She has a younger half sister who was formerly in the Sea Org and is no longer. And she has another older sister who has never been a Scientologist or never really been a Scientologist. So, but she's not in touch with anybody. Nobody outside the people in that property in San Bernardino County in California have any contact with Shelley Miscavige. And Leah filed a missing persons report.
Wait, hold on. I want to clarify because I'm confused. So you're saying nobody has, or just a small group has contact with her?
Well, there's people that are there, like looking after her or minding her or making sure she doesn't escape. Those people have contact with her. But the outside world, well, I don't know. They don't say anything to anybody.
Okay.
So after this whole fiasco of the wedding, and Leah trying to find out, well, what happened to Shelley, because they were personal friends, Leah filed a missing persons report with the Los Angeles Police Department. And that got messed around with. And
I read the tweets.
They ended up saying basically, well, we're satisfied that she's alive and well. And there is a lot of reason to believe that they didn't really find out anything. They just took what some lawyer told them, and there's also reason to believe that Scientology had unduly influenced people in the Hollywood division of the LAPD, specifically the head of it, Cory Polka. And so, that story may come out more. But what happened was, though Leah and I have been talking about Where's Shelley for a long time, and we talked about it on the Aftermath, and I even went up to that property and one of the Aftermath shows, and the PIs pop out of the bushes, and it is a sort of something that has existed in the world of Scientology or ex-former Scientologists, and not really that broadly out in the public domain. And Jared Carmichael put it squarely into mainstream media all over the world. So for that, I hope that it doesn't just die down again and everything go back to normal and nobody says or does anything about it, but that it ultimately prompts something to happen.
Okay. What I want to ask you next, and I'm going to be doing a separate show reviewing your book that I just got. Look forward to reading it. I've seen the reviews of people on Twitter. They said it was outstanding. Two things I want to ask you about the book. One, you kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. How cathartic was it for you to write the book? And if you could have one takeaway from people reading the book, what would you want it to be?
Fabulous questions. Thank you for asking those questions. Seriously, Brad, those are great questions.
Thank you.
How cathartic was it? Exceedingly. I write at the end of the book, I had pretty classic PTSD nightmares, like these horrible nightmares all the time about how I was back and I couldn't get out. I was back and I couldn't escape. I was stuck there, all this weird shit. And it was like 2, 3, sometimes more times a week. When I finished writing the book, no more.
Good.
And what I would like people to take away from it, the one thing, that it's never too late to change your life. I walked out of Scientology when I was 52 years old. Mm-hmm. I had no money. I had no family that would talk to me. I had every friend I ever had in my life had been a Scientologist. I had nowhere to go. I had no resume. I had literally nothing. And I now have a wonderful son and a new wife and, a happy life. And I hope that people, and I really want people to take away from my book that it isn't really about science. It is a book about Scientology, obviously, but the message is a broader message that no matter where you find yourself, in a crappy relationship, in an abusive relationship, in a job you don't like, in an organization that is causing you great unhappiness or abusing you, in anything, you can change that. It's not too late. If I could do it at 52 years old with nothing, you can probably do whatever it is that is confronting you. And the most gratifying thing about having written this book is the letters and direct messages and emails and tweets that I get from people, Brad, who say just that. Oh my God, I read your book. I didn't expect that it would speak to me. I've never been in a cult. I've never been in Scientology, but it spoke to me. And I saw and that is what I hope people get out of the book.
Okay. I want to ask you one more question before we segue into the second half to run the fun random questions. Is there one thing that you could say that you feel is good in Scientology that comes to you right off the top of your head?
No, I'm afraid of doing that because I'm afraid of giving anybody the impression that there may be something worth checking out and then them getting sucked into it.
Makes sense.
There are things, Brad, in Scientology. Look, if everything about Scientology was complete shit, nobody would be involved. There are things that Hubbard has taken from other places and sort of turned them into this
Right.
is what Scientologists believe, and there's kind of universal truths, about communication or being good or blah blah blah. But I don't like to I don't want to give
Understand.
anybody the idea that they
Okay.
should go try it out.
Okay, right, and that was actually I wasn't implying. That was more for to show that there was something. But okay, absolutely fair. First, fun random question: what is your favorite genre of movies?
Movies. Probably spy thrillers.
Okay, what is a movie? Interesting. What is a movie that you could put in and play over and over again, never gets old?
Lawrence of Arabia.
Great one, Peter O'Toole. Do you have a favorite TV show? And it could be yours too, if you want to say yours, but do you have a favorite one? All time.
All-time
Yeah.
favorite. Gosh, there's a whole lot. I probably have to go with Game of Thrones.
Okay. Do you have a favorite musical band?
Beatles.
Okay. If they made
Followed closely by the Rolling Stones.
You say closely followed by the Rolling Stones?
Yeah.
Okay, two great ones. If they made a movie about you, who would you like to see play you?
Oh God. Harrison Ford.
Okay. Do you have a favorite noise or sound you like to hear?
Sorry, you froze. I didn't get the question.
Okay. Do you have a favorite noise or sound you like to hear?
Rain.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the sound of rain falling on the roof or, outside, particularly when I'm in bed or sitting doing something, reading a book or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now flip it. Least favorite noise or sound.
Frozen again, Brad.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Let's see if you come back. Yep, you froze too. Oh. Okay.
Okay, you're back.
Okay. Did I ask you? Did you answer one? Flip that. Least favorite noise or sound.
Oh, least favorite? Dog barking.
Okay.
Our dog in particular.
Okay. What is your favorite or something you could eat all the time as far as food?
All the time. Eat all the time. Steak probably.
Okay. Now that you're out of Scientology all these years, well, even when you were in Scientology, you could go on vacations? I mean, I'm not being funny. No, couldn't. Okay. So since those times, all these years later, now with the new family, what's your favorite vacation destination?
Colorado.
Okay.
Or London.
Okay.
One or the other.
All right. If you could meet one person from any time in history, dead or alive, any walk of life, who would you like to meet and what would you like to talk to them about?
Wow. That's a big scope. Um, I don't want to sound sort of corny with this one, but I would say Jesus.
That's fine. It's your choice.
I mean, I would really like to hear his version of his life. What did you really do? What was the story? What actually happened? So that would be anybody in history.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground today. If you had to sum yourself up, Mike, as a human being in a few thoughts, what would you say?
That I try to do things that I believe are the right thing to do. And that I try and be as helpful as I can to others, understanding that everybody has struggles, everybody has problems, everybody has things that don't make them happy in their lives, and that if there is something that I can do that may make that a little bit better, I like to try and do it if I can.
Okay. And final question, what is your message or hope for humanity?
Oh, more love, more understanding of what other people are going through, and less preconceived and prejudged opinions about what someone else is or isn't. That the world needs to become a more harmonious and thoughtful and understanding place where you don't have the instant and often unfounded hatred or disgust or disagreements with people because you've been told that's what you should think about them.
Okay. For the viewers, go ahead and give them your social media platforms.
Oh, I mean, the main thing that I do is I do a daily blog. That's MikeRindersBlog.org. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I don't even remember what they are, but you can find me. You got Mike Rinder, a blue check Mike Rinder on Twitter. You won't have any trouble figuring out which one is the real me, because all the posts on there are either my stuff about Scientology or Scientology saying what a piece of shit I am.
There you go. Oh, well, hey, they came after me too. I want to close out with a few thoughts and give you back the microphone to close out completely. First of all, again, I appreciate you coming on today. As I said, folks, this was the first show in almost 9 years that I've been doing on my channel, but my TV interviews and my print interviews that I was ever attacked by bots and trolls. But, as we say in Italian, bafangu, because you guys don't mean anything with that crap. But they're not going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. I appreciate that you and Leah, okay, you were in a cult that I feel was a cult that you got out of, and you could have just walked away and done nothing. You didn't have to think about nobody else. You could have just done your thing, but you didn't do that. And that's why they're coming after you even more so, because you had a show and all that, you were trying to make money. You're trying to whatever. I look at it as both of you were moving humanity forward. And that's what this show is about. And I know you guys are going to attack me for saying that Mike moved humanity forward, but this is my show and I get to say what I want because that's what I believe. I don't say anything I don't believe. So you and Leo, who I would like to get on eventually too, are doing that. I appreciate that you use your platforms to help other people to try to get out of this thing, because like I said at the very beginning, any religion that tells people because they left, that's the only crime that they feel they commit, that they left. They didn't kill anybody, they didn't do any of this stuff, to turn their backs on them. That is the personification of evil. So again, thank you for doing that. I want to give you back the mic. You close out with anything you want to say.
Well, thanks, Brad. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate the intelligence and thoughtfulness of your questions. It's great. Even though you haven't read my book, which, usually what happens or often what happens is I just get asked the same old questions over and over and over. Tell me about Tom Cruise. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. So that you are thoughtful and that you clearly have an idea that you are doing something and can do something to, as you say, help move humanity forward. You're my kind of guy. You just are. I couldn't give you a higher compliment than that, and I really appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And maybe when you've read the book, we can have another chat.
Absolutely. On that note, again, thanks for coming on and take care. Hey,
Bye
folks,
now.
that's another episode of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. My man, Mike Rinder. And like I said, for the people who are going to attack me, and I know you are, and that's okay. You know what? It's your right to do that. If you want to be Mama Luke's and go about it that way, that's fine, because you know what? You didn't ask for parody. You didn't ask to come on and be heard. You just try to bully me. And guess what? That will never work. You will not bully me. You will not intimidate me. Okay? I've stood up to tougher foes than you. But if you want to make yourself look like Mama Luke's, then you do that. But again, kudos to Mike Rinder. Kudos to Leah Remini. Hopefully we get her on the show in the near future. So folks, as always, retweet this show. Tell your friends about it. This one was a little bit different than the normal ones. Not just in the fact that they attacked me. I'm laughing because this is comical. If you would have seen the stuff they put out, it's just unbelievable. But you know what? You picked the wrong ones. You picked the wrong ones, because Mike don't tolerate it, and neither do I. And Leah doesn't either. So you know what? With that said, just remember, you stand up to a bully, they always fold. They always fold, okay? And on that note, folks, enjoy the rest of your day, and remember, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Bad Brad out. Thank you for watching the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show. Please follow, subscribe, leave comments, forget about it, and move humanity forward.